Welcome to the Meditation Conversation, the podcast to support your spiritual revolution. I'm your host, Kara Goodwin, and today I'm joined by Michelle Qureshi. Michelle is an award-winning artist who is a classically trained guitarist, multi-instrumentalist, and composer. She's got 16 albums and millions of streams on global platforms under her belt. She also offers her Harmonic Sound Immersion, which is a transformative sound meditation created by the healing vibrations of ancient and modern instruments. I had Michelle on the podcast ages ago, so you can go all the way back to September 24th, 2020, and listen to episode 71 to get more of Michelle's story. So welcome, Michelle. I'm really excited to do this.
Thank you. And I'm excited to be back on the show. And meanwhile, your show keeps expanding and growing its audience. And congratulations on being in the top 3% of podcasts
Thank
globally.
you.
That's
Thank
wonderful.
you so much.
It's a lot of work and you do a great job. Yeah. So happy to be here.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to have you here. So I want to start by just filling us in on how things have progressed for you in the last 2.5 years. I know you've released more music and you've released music very recently that we can talk about. You've learned Reiki, you've done a lot of traveling and taken your music to various locations. What stands out for you as you look back over the last couple of years since you were last on here?
Right. Yeah. I'm glad you had that date because I remember I was sitting in the same room and doing it with you, but I didn't quite have the time frame. So 2020.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that was probably interesting, and I was probably in a very optimistic mode because I had just released this album and I was with a new label and we didn't quite know where the pandemic thing was going. We had a lot of false, this is over, when actually yesterday it's officially over in the US, the state
Uh-huh.
of emergency for the pandemic. So anyways, there was still so much to be weathered. And I think I've heard from you before reference like, oh, how innocent we looked back then, certain things. But so there's that on that hand. There turned out to be a lot of upheaval and change with the label I was with, which resulted, as far as music releases, kind of a full stop, which can be a very, very difficult thing for what the streaming platforms want, which is like constant content. Though I was never interested in the fast food approach, I did like to have the music I'm writing to have a channel for an outlet. And so that has been a lot to encounter over this, like you said, from the 2020 time until now. And I just negotiated within the last 6 months a waiver from the artist exclusivity with that label and just jumped into form releasing like a lot of music. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, and that has been coupled with also feeling more opportunities just for myself growing spiritually, the expansiveness of I've had your retreat in the fall. I've done other retreats both as a participant and bringing the sound immersion. I did the next level of Reiki, and it just nothing is separate. Everything is
Yeah.
part of this, and the more you tap into bigger experiences, the more those you've become part of those too. They become part of
Mm-hmm.
you, and you start feeling that kind of thing. So I would say I'm simultaneously musically expanding, spiritually expanding, and out of that tougher, unforeseen circumstance of the things that happened within that label and the things that made me not be able to use my voice, essentially, because that's what music is for me, is my expression, my
So it
self-expression.
felt like what I am understanding, I think, is that it felt like you were constricted, maybe, or not able to really fully express yourself for a while under those terms, or is
My
that accurate?
expression couldn't come out in the world. I continued to write and practice and just develop these just be the creative person I am, whether I'm making dinner or I'm making a song. It's a lot
Mhm.
about improvisation. So I
Mhm.
felt like I couldn't reach out to my larger audience due to, the legality of the music business and the label and
Mm.
all the stuff in there that it's a necessary part. You have to have these avenues to be heard. We can't do anything just on our own unless I'm content to just keep playing in my studio for myself. So
Mhm.
the constriction was like about communicating it out to fans and to people. I think maybe that's why I doubled down on the sound immersion, because that was something I could offer live and bring it out and do those expressions like that I was otherwise like being held back on. Yeah.
Mhm. Do you feel that like you said, nothing's separate. So do you feel that in your latest album or the latest kind of creations that have come about in the last couple of years, that
Mhm.
there's any sort of reflection of that type of thing or other things with it that are going on or have been going on in your journey?
I think quite definitely. Yeah. I think that always where I'm at is always informed. What I make musically is very much informed by where I'm at in my, because you can especially see that since I've been releasing since 2012 music, and I can look at sweet, naive stuff back there. And then I can, not that I won't look back on what I'm doing right now at some point and have certain expectations met or not met. But there's also the aspect of the distance from it, from what you do to be, and this is working on myself too, to be far more forgiving and accepting and appreciating, because there's a chunk of time where I felt energetically my the way I was trained in music school, or anyone is trained in music school, it all is highly critical, and it starts to lose the part about the sound of things, the beauty of sound, because it'll be like, "Oh, she used this finger, and she should have put that finger on and it becomes
Mhm.
like this, you're under a microscope, and a lot of people get closed up in that tension, like, oh, using a wrong arpeggio or for God forbid, a wrong note. That's the classical music world, though it's some people are much more gifted in that realm, and they're just able to interpret, and they have the mastery beyond this
Mhm.
world, when you watch some people play. I don't claim that. I'm my messy, unique self, and that's why I went into writing music, because, there's just so much music inside me, and that it wants to, and it does evolve as I evolve. Yeah.
Mhm. It's really
Yeah.
interesting that you talk about that, the schooling and the training and how there's just this critical aspect to it. I just
Mhm.
had an artist on, I want to last week and it hasn't been released yet, but it will by the time this one is
Mhm.
released. And her
Mhm.
name's Lauren Montacon
Mhm.
and does paintings, but
Mhm.
she had the same thing. She
Mm.
got her master's in fine art, or I'm not sure what her master's was in, but she's very much studied art and now
Mhm.
she's been doing it for a couple of decades or I think more than that. And she's like, there's such like it's going studying art, it's based on criticism. And then there's and you do keep boxing yourself in. And then I don't think we got to the level that what you're talking about in terms of, like, how it then affects the almost the purity of it, because
Mhm.
you're
Mhm.
saying that it's to the point that you're not even considering the sound. It's the
Right.
technicalities, it's the placement of the finger, it's the,
Mhm.
are you being precise
Mhm.
versus what is the evocation that's happening for the listener? Are
Right.
you and of
Mhm.
course, we understand more and more now
Yeah.
about frequency and
Mhm.
how we all respond to frequency, and we are frequency, and then, of course, sound is
Ourselves.
pure vibration and frequency,
Mhm.
so there's that, like, maybe a different level of mastery that's not yet recognized by most people, which
Mhm.
is how are we affecting the frequency of people? How are we affecting
Right.
their experience? It goes
Yes.
beyond the
Yeah.
technicalities.
Right. That's really well put. And I feel like I would not change the fact that I sought professional training, and that I also went to my master's degree in guitar performance. that foundation, I think, was critical for me to eventually shift now into a place where I can be much more intuitive in playing. And I think
Mhm.
part of that shift included like letting this music I write just flow through me because it's not scripted already. It's not like me interpreting a Bach lute suite on my guitar, which for one thing, yeah, I had to do back in the day, but I couldn't touch it now. It's complex. It's it becomes very intellectualized. And what I wanted was a shift of playing from the heart. And after all, it's a guitar and you're holding it against your heart. And to take a look now, as you say, to balance attention and intention with my
Mhm.
playing, with the music
Yeah.
I share. And yeah, I think that's definitely finding that balance, knowing you don't have to be trained to play something. That's the weird thing about music, right? Somebody can play an instrument and they can not know a note of music, but it can touch someone.
Mm.
I'm from the school of like, I want to know what that note is, but I'll let myself forget about why I play it and try to impact you,
Yeah.
affect you, make you feel
Mhm.
something through this vibration. Yeah.
Yeah. It's fascinating because you mentioned you've got your harmonic sound immersions,
Hmm.
and that I feel is very much a journey, like, for you and for the listener where it's like, okay, what can be evoked? Because it's such an intuitive thing, and I know you're
Hmm.
constantly bringing, like, new instruments into it
Instruments.
and trying
Yes.
new things of because it's and then from a participant's perspective, which I've been a participant in many, many harmonic sound immersions, and it's
Hmm.
like it can become like a shamanic journey, which
Hmm.
again, this podcast episode hasn't been released as of when we're recording it, so you wouldn't have heard it yet, but I had somebody on named Martin Teese, and it will be released by the time this is released. But
Okay.
he does shamanic journeys, and the medium that he does
Hmm.
it through is drumming. Because I talked about, like,
Hmm.
how do you evoke these journeys? Is it plant medicine? Is it
Yeah.
drumming? Is it whatever? And
Yeah.
so and that's been an ancient lineage that he learned through the Native Americans.
Mhm.
And so it's like sound is so powerful,
Mhm.
and there is definitely, I feel, maybe I'm
Mhm.
projecting, but with the harmonic sound immersion, where it is such a everyone is like this dance of what wants to be birthed here
Yes,
for the people
yes,
who are here right
or who are
now.
here. It really does matter. It really energetically, I'm just guided, realizing that more and more as from in the beginning, I was maybe holding a little too much about expectations or direction, but they just feel so much more exciting and free to just go on this journey. And
Mhm.
definitely with the drumming is a shamanic tool and technique. Locally, we have Meredith Eastwood with her active dreaming, leads these journeys. And in many of her workshops, she'll do 30 seconds or a minute, and then I'll come in with the guitar because we like both.
Mhm.
And yeah, and I've just come around to realizing that I want to bring, at least for the invocation, the starting of it, some drumming because it's taken a while for me just to have that beat process that vibration because I
Mhm.
always think of a beat more root chakra kind of like just
Mhm.
lower kind of thing. And my music, I put third eye and above, and crown kind of music.
Mhm.
But on this recent trip, I should say, because we're confusing journey and trip. On this
Uh-huh.
trip I just had in Morocco, I actually found the drum that I'm going to use for my next harmonic sound immersion. I
Oh.
bought one. It's camel skin and it's got a pretty cool sound. So yeah,
Oh,
this will be brought in.
awesome.
Yeah.
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 Well, that's
Yeah.
really cool. Well,
Mhm.
tell us about the new music that you've just released. I know, again, projecting, but when
Mhm.
I engage with it, and I've told you this, it seems a very layered experience.
Mhm.
Um, and you and I have had a little bit of back and forth about that. I don't know if it feels that way for you too, but
Yeah. Well,
tell
it
us what we
is. Yeah. Well, so it's called A Blueprint for Life. And that title was inspired by work I've done with many people, including you, but also concluding another local person we have here, Sally Knopp, and
Mm.
exploring, who you've interviewed as
She's
well.
been on here several times. Yeah.
Several
Yeah.
times, yeah,
Uh-huh.
and heard her explanation of a blueprint in our lives inspired this, and we've had some really deep experiences, discussions, thoughts on that, and that kind of laid the groundwork for me to bring this music into a blueprint for my life and for anyone's life, and to seek that out, find out what is that energetic connection and purpose, because obviously I feel my purpose, I feel I'm serving it, and that part of that is to expand, bring this music out more. There's healing aspects to my music, though I like to keep that understated as far as we have an anything goes with like sound healers anymore. And it's like, can a Sufi call him or herself a Sufi? Not really. If you're calling yourself a Sufi, you're probably not Sufi. So I like to just like in Reiki, if you come in and say your neck hurts, I can't guarantee anything's going to happen with your neck, but the energy goes where it needs to go. And
Mhm.
I feel like that when I'm writing, when I'm performing, that goes as it needs to go, and we just keep bringing it forth. So, anyways, to be a little more specific about a blueprint for life, I envisioned home as symbolically as our self, right, our house, and then I picked 5 architectural details to develop these pieces on. And you're right, they're not just energetically layered, they're literally layered because there's one guitar line here, one guitar line there, and they're on top of each other, and you're following a melodic phrase in one, and then your attention's taken over here, and then maybe it's a little bit sparse and there's space to think about, oh, what was oh, here it comes back in. So
Mm.
the first 4 tracks are like these layers of guitar and with sometimes a little subtle pad just to like ground you like, okay, you're here and that's there and that's happening. And then for the final track, I flipped that narrative and I brought all the like the musical pads and the kind of more ambient sounds really kind of forefront. And you just have this one singular note on the guitar. The pitch will change, but it's never more than one note at a time. And it's like bringing home all of this into this. And that's the last track. And you'll be like, wait, this is different. And then you try to feel why it is different. And in fact, it's intentionally different because it's bringing this whole blueprint to a close. And if I can
Mm.
quickly say the titles, Open Window. Well, we all know an open window, what that means to us. The next one is something called Hidden Lines. And I did a little research on architecture. I didn't know hidden lines was a thing, but on your blueprint, there are hidden lines. And these are the things that, you will not see when it's finished. And I just thought
Mm.
symbolically that is very cool. We have so many hidden lines, right? And then the
Yeah.
next, I was playing a little bit on the shape and the golden mean and the spiral. Just, I
Mm.
love that shape again and again. And so that's called Spiral Staircase. And
Mhm.
I mean, there's so much, it's so fluid. A spiral is just really, to me, so putting music to it really felt like, that goes. Then the next one was, or the fourth track is called Hearth because I wanted a sense of home in this, and I love fire. And in fact, I used a picture from our fire ceremony in my video
Uh-huh.
because it's just that beautiful, there's people. It doesn't say who all is there, but it's just fire's just so cleansing. I really like
Mhm.
it. So bringing that into this blueprint, I thought it was important to have something like a hearth. And then that final track, which I said flip the narrative, is called Elevations.
Mm.
And that is the close on a blueprint for life. And so,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah. It's beautiful. And it's interesting when we talk about, because you mentioned about it, there being undertones of healing and not
Hmm.
wanting to outright make claims, which I
Yeah.
completely get. And I feel that there so much of it, like we talked about how people have frequency and
Yeah.
the music has frequency. And so I'm sure there's an element of like, first of all, everybody being touched in some way when they listen, whether
Mhm.
they're aware of it or not. Like, some people
Right.
just aren't going to be able to tune in. There's too much
Yeah.
going on. They don't know how to drop in and really be
Yeah.
in tune with, like, oh, what is this doing to me? It doesn't
Mhm.
mean it's not doing anything. It just means that there may be like a very literal material
Right, right.
worldview
Yeah.
where it's like,
Mhm.
well, it's not making me fall asleep. It's not making me want to get up. I mean, all the things, like, their cues just
Uh,
they're not into that subtlety. They're not
it's
tuned
a
into
little
the subtlety.
it's a little more denser interpretation, right? Just a little density
Right.
there. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And then
Yeah.
there's also the music having its own frequency that will resonate with people. So either it offers something to kind of awaken a part of them that's not quite awake yet, but
Mhm.
ready to wake
Mhm.
up, or it's completely in line with where they're
Mhm.
vibing. And it's like, "Oh,
Right.
this is
Yeah.
familiar. This is like
Yeah.
home," because it's
Right.
reflecting
Yeah.
to them a home vibration. So
Yeah.
it just seems that there's so many, again, different layers, different
Layered.
level
Yeah.
of
Right.
how it can be experienced by
Mhm.
different people in different parts of where they are with their spiritual awareness.
Right, right. And I absolutely agree about the layers and the receptivity. And my lack of saying, listen to my music, it's going to heal you,
Mhm.
is just due to you just want to stay humble and not presumptive, presuming things. But I'm happy when people tell me the healing effects they experience. That to me is
Mhm.
legitimate. But for me to claim, I just don't want to. I'm just like, come take what you can from it at whatever
Mhm.
level you are. Come back to it because it's gonna reveal more and more. It's just like,
Mhm.
and someone I was working with was telling me, "Oh, you make it things so complicated. It just needs to be simple and get out there." And I'm like, that's you can't just make it simple, end of story. It has to,
Mhm.
number one, reflect me, and I'm very
Mhm.
layered, and I
Yeah.
love deeper meanings, and I wanna have them under there for people who want to, like, search for it and experience it. At the same time, like you said, people are experiencing all at different levels, and they might not have the right articulation to express what it is, but that's the beauty of music. You don't need words, you just
Mm.
need to feel and experience it. Yeah,
Yeah. I
yeah.
love that. I love I mean, so much within that because the getting the advice from somebody else who maybe
Mhm,
knows, like, their niche, or they have
mhm,
their experience, and something may have worked really well for them, that's like, just
mhm.
make it easy, just get it out.
Yeah,
Don't
yeah.
think too much about it. And I've had similar things where there have been people that I've looked to for advice with, like, "Oh,
Mhm.
I don't really know how to move this forward. I've never done a project like this. So
Yeah.
how do we do it?" And it's like, "Oh, if I've approached everything with being very deliberate, being
Mhm,
very, like, more tuned in with where I believe people are, rather than this,
mhm,
like, gunshot approach,"
mhm.
or like AI is a big one, and I AI has a lot of potential. I use some to help me write some of my show notes and things like that, just give me a foundation to build upon. So there's some
Mhm.
really cool things that we can do with AI,
Yeah.
but there are people advising of just like, here's how you can, it can write your
Oh my
emails, it
god.
can do, and it's like, huh, okay. And is that gonna be right for everybody's work?
No, of
Like,
course not.
right,
Yeah,
that
of
might
course
be
not.
right
Yeah,
if you're writing a standard operating procedure, that could carry you pretty
right.
far. But if you wanna have, like, an email that's gonna connect with people, is that
Mhm,
something that you wanna entrust to artificial
mhm,
intelligence, or is it more of a
mhm.
heart-based, depending on what kind of work you do, you know?
Yeah, right, right, but I agree, leaning on it for something where our authenticity is highly important.
Yeah.
The thing I've started to lean on AI for has been the to get started on some album art covers. Okay. And
Yeah.
there's an aspect in A Blueprint for Life where I asked for one of those layers. If you look at the album cover, it's layered and beautiful. But a piece of that is AI generated.
Mhm.
One of the reasons for that is when I was with this label, after the initial album, there were 2 singles released. Each one, I had no control over the album cover, and I was like, ugh, when I saw them because they're stock images, and you'll
Mhm.
find other people using them, and, that's like, why would you do that? So I with
Yeah.
the AI, you're holding on to an element of something that is unique to this project and which I've manipulated so much you would never kind of find it. But yeah,
Yeah.
in this case, that's the purpose and the reason I'll render something and use it as a part of the overall, never just
Mhm.
straight up. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and yeah, and I'm not wanting to put down AI. I think there's a lot of
Mhm.
there's a lot of really fascinating potential there. It's
Mhm.
more around the authenticity part where we're
Exactly.
wanting to be reflected in our creative
Uh-huh.
work. And it's like,
Yeah.
okay, there are things that we can do, or we can take somebody else's model and say, oh, look what they did. They've
Mhm.
reached a lot of people in this way. And then you
Mhm.
get some peek behind the curtain of like how that was done. And it's like,
Mhm.
oh, is that applicable now to
Mhm.
this kind of creative work? Where
Yeah.
it is like, for example, for a musician who's doing a certain type of genre, it
Mhm.
may be that, why spend a bunch of time on your art? They wanna listen to it, so maybe that's valid if for some people. But if it's like, "Okay, I understand who I am, I understand who's listening, and I understand the experience that I wanna give people," then we're
Uh-huh.
back in that, like, empowerment kind of
You're right.
understanding who we are and what we
Mhm.
want to get out of our creative
Yeah.
work and
Yeah.
what that means for the people that we want to offer it to.
Right, right. I know. I can't imagine the AI using it for your music message. I just can't. But I know this is according to the date of us recording that just recently this week, I think Spotify removed tens of thousands of AI generated tracks.
Oh,
Yeah,
is that right? I
yeah.
didn't hear about that.
However, a friend of mine from Australia posted underneath that post the more recent article that says Spotify reinstates
Oh,
tens of thousands of
interesting.
tracks. But yeah, as people who are writing music and playing it themselves and like cr doing the whole 9 yards, we've been up against a lot of AI music that's out there, a lot. Yeah, yeah, because
Interesting.
especially in the mood music genre, especially where it's not utilizing perhaps an instrument that takes a certain amount of craft, when it's just
Mhm.
synthesizers and pads, you can program a mood music quite easily with this stuff, I believe. Yeah,
Oh, interesting.
yeah,
I
yeah.
would love to see what the sound waves might look like
Uh-huh.
for, like, synthesized music versus, like, the same type of music, but
Uh,
on physical instruments. That'd be interesting. I was reading some Lynn McTaggart, who wrote The Power of Eight, listening to
yeah.
her book, and
Uh-huh.
she cited some sort of study where it was like, and I can't remember now the method of the study, but there was a
Mhm.
differentiation, something like I can't remember if it was like a living thing could differentiate or if it was like if you look at it under a microscope or whatever, but the
Uh-huh.
synthetic essential oil versus natural essential
Uh-huh.
oil, synthetic something, and again, not things that I would necessarily even notice. Like if I'm
Uh-huh.
interacting with essential oils, I don't necessarily even think about like, has this been synthesized
Uh-huh.
or is it
Yeah.
naturally derived?
Yeah.
And but there was something in that there was a difference, like, at this level where it was like, if
Mhm.
it's a pure, naturally derived
Uh-huh.
essential oil, for example,
Uh-huh.
there was a differentiation between the ones that were synthesized and
Interesting. Yeah. I wonder what kind of measure because I'll take a look and send you some sound waves of just a synth track versus it's I mean they're gonna look different just by their nature. But I don't know if you would I think an interesting experiment would be the like listening like brainwave patterns listening to something completely
Yeah.
AI versus that. Now would that show any difference? That would
Yeah.
be interesting, right? Yeah. But I'm not
And
sure what things you would measure. Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
And what how you might be able to affect that depending on how you use the AI. So
Mhm.
if you, like, just went for mood music and it
Uh-huh.
was like, I want calming music that's been AI generated versus something that a human created, but
Yeah.
then how can you query it? Because maybe it's like AI music, AI generated music that is at a specific frequency,
Mhm.
528 or something,
Yeah. Yeah. Uh-huh.
and versus like something that somebody has created themselves that's at that same
Yeah.
frequency, and if there's a difference in the
Yeah.
brain
Yeah.
waves or that'd be really
Right.
interesting.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a whole new world.
Yes, right.
Yeah. And it's just like you said, like when, the start of social media or the beginning of all of us having phones and computers, it's like there can be great things and there can be awful things. So
Yeah.
and that's the thing with AI, like we've been warned that this could go that way, but it also, you don't want to get rid of the potential of what if
Mm.
it was just gonna do good? That would be
Right.
amazing, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
Well, tell us, Michelle, how people can connect with you and find your music and all that good stuff.
Sure. Well, my website is based on my name. It's michellequreshi.com. Qureshi will be in the notes, so I won't spell it out here, right?
Yeah.
So it's a little tricky. And of course, I have a Instagram and Facebook account. It's probably again easier just to notate them in the notes than
Yeah.
spell them out. But I would invite people to subscribe and join me there as well as YouTube. I have a link tree right on my website, which will take you to streaming and socials. And I've had an interesting thing happening now on my Facebook music page. And it's basically my lesson was energetically like quit watching the pot. It's not going to boil when you're watching it. Okay. Yeah.
Mm.
I left for Morocco in last month. And before I left, I said, okay, as you know, with the pages, you can schedule posts while you're gone. And I was like, I'm going to stay off my phone in this trip in Morocco and just enjoy myself, which I did immensely. But I did like every other day, I put a video to come out on my Facebook page. And like the day after I got there, I started getting just hit after hit, and I could hardly load the pages, I could hardly do it, and it was just a very simple, quick video of me on the harp guitar that the video was over a year ago, and it's just like, you just don't know when something's gonna click, but I do know that I was just leaving it alone, right, and not
Yeah.
expecting that, and it just keeps growing and growing. I'm so grateful for that, and one of the things that I just find fascinating is like you go through the likes and the shares. It's almost shared 2,000 times, and the
Wow.
reach is over a quarter of a million people it's reached
That's
out to. And I'm like,
amazing.
I love like when people like it, then you can look at your likes and see.
Mhm.
And these names are all over the world. Some in scripts I don't know. Some of the
Yes.
alphabets are like, oh, and to me that's like and it's like people are talking about the healing effects and the beauty
Yeah.
of it and the way it touched them. And it's like once you put a piece of music out in the world, it's everybody's now. It's not yours anymore.
Yeah.
It's everybody's to interpret and feel and experience it as they
Yeah.
will. So that's my story about part of this shifting too. It's just like, you don't need to micromanage it, but you get in your way sometimes
Yeah.
and just be free. And I was out there having a fantastic time playing my guitar with local musicians, playing it for at a women's shelter, playing it for our yoga classes. And that's what I'm meant to do.
Mm.
So if I can keep like going around the world, taking a guitar and reaching one to one and have this beautiful potentiality in these platforms that'll just go ahead and bring in more people to share this music. That's working for me. Yeah, that's how
Yeah,
it's supposed to work.
I
Oh,
love
yeah.
it. What a blessing. Well, thank you so much, Michelle. This has really been a fun discussion.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
yeah, I wish you all the best with this latest release. Everybody check it out. A Blueprint for Life on all the platforms, right? And on your link
Right.
tree.
Yes. Thank you. Well, thank you so much for your friendship and for being a fan. That doesn't I have a lot of friends and they're not necessarily into this music. So it's a bonus for me. Thank you. Okay.
Yeah, thank you for bringing it out into the world,
Mhm.
answering the call.